The world has ended. Everything that remains of humanity's culture is stored here in this podcast, a time capsule assembled by three white dudes from what was once called the Midwest. This is not everything. This is not most things. But this is it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of This Is It, a pop culture podcast for the end of the world. I'm Sam Webb.
And I am Gabe Webb.
And I'm Daniel Osborne.
And every episode of This Is It, we try to capture a little bit of that sweet, sweet pop culture nug that you and your dirt camps are trying to rub two memes together to start a culture fire.
I mean, dirt camps, shanty towns,
Yeah.
hobo villages, or for the elite, pleasure palaces.
Or broken down space stations. Yeah.
We don't want to judge. Whatever you're bringing to the table, we've got you.
Yeah, but if you're just like a middle class pre-apocalypse person, then I mean, you can listen too, but like just know that it isn't for you. And I think today I am bringing our topic of discussion, and guys, I would like to harken back a little bit to an earlier time, a simpler time, really. And I want to explain to our post-apocalyptic listeners about high school.
The golden years.
For six of the 300 people that attended my high school, maybe the golden years.
Before we dive in, I kind of want to get like a 1 to 2 sentence baseline reading. What and who were you in high school? Because so much of I think what we're going to talk about, or I think is being distilled to your essence is high school, and so bring it here. Who were you? Who were you in high school?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess I was. I don't know.
Sam didn't come out of high school with the defining essence of being boiled down into one thing.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't leave high school feeling more like Sam than ever before.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I think I was. My high school experience was very much like, because of the classes I took, I saw the same 15 people in every single one of them. And so it was kind of this, like, our collective identity was like of the quote unquote like AP kids.
Yeah.
Because advanced placement classes were like what we were all in, and all these people who took all of them for the most part. So I wouldn't say like nerds, but I definitely think like academically sound individuals was like our identifying factor.
And I mean, I would say that I fell into a very similar social strata in high school. Especially in that, like, me and my friends were very, like, we were the high achieving ones, like the like top 10% of the class, valedictorian, salutatorian types.
Brag.
Just maybe we all went to Harvard.
Harvard was a learning institution before it was turned into a refugee center.
But one thing that I've always wondered about since high school, were we just oblivious to the fact that we were the nerds?
Yeah, I've wondered that too.
Like, did all the because there was like a different clique of like popular kids too, who were like the more like the cheerleaders, the football players, the like wrestlers, like the sports people.
Right. The sportsons.
See, I knew who and what I was. I was separate in the theater kids, which is already a group of misfits.
Oh, yeah.
But I wasn't even one of the popular theater kids who would like get drunk and make out with each other. I then went home and did my AP homework.
Yeah.
And just like, hey guys, what's the difference between bourbon and vodka? I don't even know. And like these kids knew.
But
And
it's also it's insane that like those are not too inaccurate descriptors of what makes you a popular theater kid.
right.
Yeah.
No, it's absolutely yeah.
And future, just so you're clear, this was a time before we were assigned our roles.
Yeah.
And so this was not like the reason we're having a hard time is not because we can't remember. It's that this was before it was branded onto us at age 11.
No, definitely.
But yeah, I because
find-
we weren't like picked on. Ever.
Yeah,
like
no.
there was
Yeah.
I encountered 0% bullying in high school.
And yeah, we'll talk about that more, but I do feel like I don't know if bullying used to be more of a thing or if I just dodged it or what, but
Right. Like we existed in the right moment of time that like cyberbullying was in its infancy and regular bullying was like on the
Yeah.
outs.
yeah.
like Facebook was still so brand new when we were in high school that like it
We had-
was genuinely just kind of like you felt like your Facebook identity was still too tied to your real identity to be able to be like a troll.
Right. Yeah, we hadn't figured out how to properly harass each other
Yeah.
anonymously over the internet
Just really min-max the
or publicly shame each other electronically.
simpler times, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we want to talk about some of the pop culture that pertains to what how high school gets portrayed. And Dan, why don't you start us off? What are when I say high school, you say what?
When you say high school, I say spirit. But no, I think there are kind of two big groups that pop culture in high school fall into. There's the high school movies, films, TV shows that high school is the best and it's the coolest and you fall in love and then you go to prom and it's so good. And then there's this is some dumb shit you do for 4 years of your life.
Yeah.
And then you go on. And I don't think one is necessarily more right than the other. I think those are just two different worldviews about high school. Like I live in a town where high school is a huge part of your identity and you continue to go to those football games
Yeah.
and you continue to give a shit and care. So on the one hand of high school being this nirvana of love and angst and sex and drinking, I throw to the Tina Fey classic Mean Girls,
Beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
which I hope I didn't just like pull the rug out from under everybody else. So you have former child star Lindsay Lohan pretending to be a girl from Africa, playing a girl from Africa who gets dropped in, and she happens to be conventionally attractive. So she gets, as an outsider, she's pulled into a group of outsiders and into a group of popular girls, and she gets to live with one foot in both camps and just gets to experience making out with a hot person and plotting against another hot person. And
Yeah.
it's high drama and just it's so much more interesting and intriguing
Yeah.
than the high school I went to. Because the opposite side is the short-lived TV show Freaks and Geeks,
yeah.
which is just a bunch of misfits. It's two groups of kids. One is a bunch of stoners, more or less stoners and burnouts, and the other is classically nerdy, literally in the AV club kids. And high school is neither great nor terrible. Your teachers are dicks, and you just kind of, your parents don't understand you, and you just kind of move on. But it's not Valhalla, and it's not hell either.
Yeah, like I think that there's a common theme, maybe more so in TV shows about high school, where they can kind of get into more like problem of the week type stuff. Where like Freaks and Geeks, there's moments where there is that high drama, and then it's not so much that it gets resolved in the same way that like a courtroom drama gets resolved. It's more just that they realize that like some adult who gets things a little bit more decides to sit them down and be like, listen, you're going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to suck, but it's going to suck a little bit less every day. And you're going to realize that this isn't like the end all be all of everything. And I feel like that's a common thread in high school pop culture, is just that there is that like, oh, it really, like it's on one side just selling you on the idea that it matters so much because as an adolescent, it's hard to not feel that way.
Right.
And then the transition, almost always the high school reveal is sort of like, yeah, we all grew up and we realized what shitheads we all were. So like, cool. And I like Mean Girls as an example specifically. And it's maybe, this is actually pretty common in most high school movies. And I'm sure in most of the ones we talk about, where like, what I like about it from a sharing it and putting in the time capsule standpoint is that it's a movie that explains itself a lot.
Yeah.
Like high school movies live and die on the idea of like, let me explain all these different groups and how they interact with one another. It's not bad or annoying. It's like helpful that there's just so much explaining of every single group.
The characters literally at one point have a literal map.
Yeah.
And point out to the point of view character, this is this group, this is the jocks, this even broken down by ethnic groups by friendliness.
Yes.
And like, here is where all of them are. Now you know where you are in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, so I like Mean Girls and Freaks and Geeks. Those are both awesome examples.
I think to date, Mean Girls and Freaks and Geeks might actually be some of the best pop culture we've put in the time capsule.
I would say that as of this moment, like, we're doing the future so much more of a favor by incorporating those two.
Well, and I think one of the more interesting things about both of those is that they do come at the approach of growing up from both angles of you sort of like you are the hero, but you are also the villain.
Yeah.
And that people have in both of those, there are very few examples of people who throughout the entire run of the show or throughout the entire movie are all bad or all good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have Lindsay Lohan who slowly descends into the world of the mean girl, to the point where she stands up her friend Janice at the art show.
Yeah.
And she yells at her and throws the drawing at her from the roof of Damien's car. But you also have that in Freaks and Geeks in terms of like Neil discovering that his father is having an affair in one episode.
Well, and Daniel, James Franco's character, is neither good nor bad. Like he has runs where he's an asshole.
Yeah.
And then I rewatching it recently, I'm like, why did I like find anything likable about this guy? It's the finale of the show when he sits down and plays D&D with the nerds.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And like, it's this one moment of redemption of like, oh, you're not just skeezy. Like, I love the way you put that. Everyone's the hero and the villain.
And even his girlfriend Kim in the show, I mean, like, she's just absolutely terrible, just so mean to Lindsay throughout the entire run until we actually get to empathize with her eventually when we get to see sort of where she comes from, which, while not like totally redemptive, is at least like at that point you can empathize with it.
Right. There's a difference between a justification and an explanation.
Right.
Gabe, what do you feel like contributing to the time capsule?
Yeah, well, those two were actually both on my list. But I would say there is one thing that I've noticed about Mean Girls. So like Mean Girls came out in 2004.
Sounds right.
Okay. Well, either way, we are now at the point in history where we are as far from Mean Girls as Mean Girls was from Clueless. So I have been on the lookout recently for what will become the next like quintessential high school movie, because I feel like Clueless was in a lot of ways a pre Mean Girls
Yes.
exercise in capturing the zeitgeist of high school in 1990s.
Yeah.
1995.
Yeah, 1995.
Okay. 1995, like the ideal, I mean, so much of so much of Clueless is imported from like 90210, like Beverly Hills 90210.
Yeah.
Just in that like the Southern California like valley girl is the epitome of female like aspirations, and like her jock boyfriend or whatever is like the aspiration of man, the Adonis of the day.
Well, and that's one thing that I think is kind of interesting about like thinking about these high school movies. Like you can do the comparison of like Clueless being a break, like a encapsulation of 1995. Maybe not what high school actually was in 1995, but what the public perception of idealized high school was. Like that's what the look and feel and the characters all kind of have that vibe. And then Mean Girls similarly like kind of updates those things. And I think that a lot of what we see in high school movies is really just kind of a look at like where adolescence was at that moment. Like
Right.
in just this you see things that like maybe don't get super well explained if you're watching it out of context. Like you don't get to like them articulating like this is the mall. A mall is a place with a lot of store. Like they like it just sort of like they reference the Galleria so many times in Clueless, and it's just like it's whatever is going on, and people assume it's reflecting the current culture.
You talking about how high school movies often reflect the sort of like the idealized, or at least like the moment of like that day's youth culture is pretty interesting. And that it made me think of the remake of 21 Jump Street.
Oh yeah.
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 And well, there's like a really short like bit in the very beginning where they're like going into the high school for the first time, and they make fun of a boy by like calling him gay.
Yeah.
And then the rest of them are just like, what? So are you a homophobe? Like,
Yeah.
like they shame him for that, which I think is very indicative of like going to high school. Well, I wasn't going to high school in 2010, the early 20-teens.
Yeah.
But in my mind, that's what it's like now. So you
No.
kids better be delivering.
Yeah. You can go further back, and in terms of high school movies that capture a different era, and I feel like one that is actually worth mentioning is Grease.
Yeah.
Right.
Like and it's amazing that you take a look at like Grease and Clueless and Mean Girls, and there's not a whole lot in common, and yet there's still like the structure is there, that there's the groups and the idea of conforming to a specific group, and more specifically like people having to figure out why they like somebody from a different group and how to make that work when social pressure is so high, and then the inevitable makeover scene. And that I think what's interesting is that the makeover scene in Grease is at the very end, and it's supposed to be like the climax, exciting, good thing in the movie is that this nice girl who was her own person got made over to be like everybody else, and that was how she was going to be able to be with the guy that she wanted to be with, because he's like a greaser type, like leather jacket wearing dude, and he'd failed at trying to be something that he wasn't in order to be with her, so she inevitably just got changed. And then in Clueless, it's the weird new girl in town. So like Grease, it's like a third act, like final thing. Clueless,
It's top of the film. Like,
well, and it's kind of the inciting incident is just them being like, yeah, we're gonna make this girl like one of us, but it's kind of played for weirdness, but it's also like we're doing her a favor. And then Mean Girls is just like, let's do this because it will be like a way to destroy this clique. And so it, like the mindset of it going from the makeover is how you win to we're going to try and help this girl, but ultimately we're going to learn that she doesn't need our help, to like we're going to destroy girls by sort of like it's slowly parodying itself over like an echo chamber of makeovers.
But it's curious to think that to think of that pattern, but then also perhaps the most millennial high school movie imaginable, Disney's High School Musical trilogy, tries so hard to like negate that trope though. Because across all three films, you see the tension
Yeah.
between Troy's basketball career, and and
And her sciencing, like,
yeah, like the theater. There's the obviously like played out sports v theater rivalry, but I mean they definitely spin a lot of them into like a lot of others into it.
yeah.
I mean,
Did he get his head in the game?
Oh, he got his head in the game. Ugh, I don't like there's a recording of me saying that.
But yeah, that movie is sort of like a pretty cut and dry, like we can all be friends even though we exist in different cliques. So there's less of that makeover idea and more just that you can exist in more than one bubble.
Right.
And part of that is because it's two people who have their own bubbles, but they meet in a third bubble because they're a jock and like a science person, but they both want to be in the musical.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess if you also look at High School Musical 2,
Yes, let's look at it. Let's get into it.
we really get like we see a lot of that intersection point of like third bubbles, like you were talking about, like Corbin Blue's character and I forget his name, Sharpay's brother.
Yeah. Sharpay's brother.
Who's like the tension between them is sports and dancing, but they like join forces. But the whole of the film revolves around the country club talent show.
Yeah.
And like how are we going to be in the talent show?
Yeah.
No, but the third bubble is probably what differentiates the High School Musical trilogy from all the others.
Yes.
Having never seen one of these, I'm so befuddled.
Okay, so let's explain it real quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have Zac Efron and Vanessa Hudgens.
Vanessa Hudgens, yeah.
Are two people who have like a chance meeting right before the school year starts where they do karaoke together, and it is electric.
I'm actually much better versed in the second one.
You mean the one where Zac Efron has to decide where he's going to go play basketball in college and works at a golf course?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also traipses around that golf course angry.
Oh, yeah.
Before talking to his reflection in a water hazard and slapping the water.
Yep.
There's also at the very end when the two lanterns that Troy and Gabriella are carrying fly away.
That's a beautiful moment.
A totally plausible thing that happens. Yeah, okay.
No one's gonna listen to this. This
no.
is
Most of that was just for our own edification.
Yeah. Just for Dan to have some background.
part of my takeaway is that we're putting the idea of a high school movie, we're putting high school in the time capsule, but really every piece of high school media is unto itself a time capsule.
Yeah.
In a way that not a lot of other things are. Like, all right, Grease was filmed in the late 70s, early 80s, but it's
Yeah.
supposed to be a time capsule for the 50s.
Right.
And Clueless in the 90s, and High School Musical in the late aughts. What can we learn? Like, what can we take away from high school media as now non or former high school people?
I think that it speaks to the plasticity of adolescence.
Oh,
That, like,
someone's dating a therapist.
that like when we are in that age range of 13 to 18, let's just say that
Sure.
for the youngins and the oldens in high school, that really like our identity is never more shaped by our surroundings, and that like those surroundings are both in the school and broken down into the cliques and things that are kind of universal, like the idea of your group, your tribe, whatever, is very present no matter where you look, but that there's also that even those ideas and tribes and pervading factors are affected by the culture at large, and that like you don't really have an internal sense of yourself to the extent that you do later in life. So you do sort of just reflect whatever's going on in whatever time period. So yeah, like it's just a bunch of people like grouped together trying to like keep people from questioning them too much. So they just like act out however they see it modeled elsewhere, either from like the adults in their lives or the other people in their high school. And that part of that is like, yeah, if you watch a lot of Madonna music videos, then you create a world a little bit more like Clueless. Or like MTV culture in general, and like if you start to feel comfortable with the idea that that's what people will see you as, so you don't have to worry about explaining yourself to as many people, and then you go to college and you take that with you a little bit, and then it slowly gets shaved into an actual person.
If you're lucky,
or you just like go with the same people, and then you're just a Cleveland Browns fan for your whole life by some horrible accident.
I would say that one of the most quintessential pieces of high school media is a book that I think most people are assigned to read in high school. That, while not necessarily about a high schooler, is about a lot of the things that you sort of figure out around that time anyway. To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yep.
Which I have reread as an adult. As if I'm old. But I've since gone back and reread it after graduating high school, and I think one of the things that struck me was that it's not necessarily a tremendously substantive work of literature, which I know is probably going to get me like chewed out on the internet, but I think thematically it's it definitely does speak to a level of like empathy that I think you only become aware of. Like the protagonist Scout is very precocious for her age. I mean, aside from the weirdness of calling her father Atticus by his first name, like just like the observations she makes, and the way he talks to her, I think illuminates a lot of like the way in which I think as you sort of hit that age, you become aware of how different other people are. Like you become more, I think one of the like essential parts of growing up from like child development standpoint, but also from like a personal standpoint, is just like realizing how, while you are sort of the hero of your own story, and in like that old kind of cliche, everyone else is also that for themselves. And the more agency, as you get older, the more agency you begin to sort of ascribe to other people. And I mean, it can be like your parents, and the way that like Scout's perception of Atticus changes over the course of the novel, or like people who are not like you in terms of like race within the novel, or even socioeconomic class. So yeah, I think it is essential high school understanding, in that like one on the emotional tone that the book strikes, but also two in the fact that I think every American high schooler is assigned to read it, and either doesn't read it or like reads it and maybe gets something out of it.
Yeah, no, I like that being included. Dan, you mentioned you had another bit.
I have a piece of audio. I have episode 186 of the radio program This American Life, which touches on which is specifically about one part of high school that we haven't mentioned yet, but ends up being a big theme, and that is, the title of the episode is Prom. And I just wanted to highlight an observation they make in this. First off, it's all nonfiction or mostly nonfiction, which I think is important to include in this list as well. But one of the observations that they make is that there's something about a high school that your whole life is like building up. It's kind of got this end point, and your whole life is building up to it, and that ending is prom. Basically, it's not even graduation, especially if the piece of culture is romantic themed.
Oh yeah.
Prom is the equivalent to a grown-up romantic comedy's wedding.
Yes,
like that's the
totally.
end point. That's what you're trying to get to, and it's where it all boils down. And there's only like 2 times in your life that it's like that. And in your wedding, the attention really is all on you, but in prom, you feel like it's all on you because you're an idiot. But I just wanted to bring out, when you see, if you dig up a piece of high school media and it's everyone's obsessed on prom and who's going to the prom and who's asking who to the prom, that's because that's the most important night of these idiots' lives.
Yeah.
Up to this point, that is it. Like, it is their social status. It is their it is all of these things rolled into one. And so I wanted to make sure that this conversation didn't end without emphasizing the weight and gravity of a high school prom, especially how it's portrayed in media.
Yeah, that makes me think of a short-lived animated series on the MTV network called Clone High. Which is great if for no other reason than it like is parodying so many different high school television show tropes that you can watch that and get kind of everything that comes from 90210 or Dawson's Creek or what's it called,
One Tree Hill.
Saved by the Bell.
Saved by the Bell.
All of those kind of get molded into one thing, which is the premise is that there's a high school filled with people that are the clone teenage age selves of famous historically significant dead people like JFK and Cleopatra and Abraham Lincoln all go to the same high school. And Joan of Arc and Jesus are also there. Gandhi is there. But that there's a specific episode in that where they talk about asking people to prom, and they refer to it as promposals. and that is a real, like, it mirrors a real thing. And in the show, it is outlandish. And I think someone jumps out of a helicopter and then proceeds to do something ridiculous after they jump out of a helicopter, and the person is still underwhelmed by their efforts. But yeah, that show just needs to in its entirety get thrown into the canon, because it is there's only like 10 episodes and everyone hits on like at least one major, like from the house party to like the prom to like the career day, or like dealing with your parents.
Oh yeah, if you're short on time, Clone High is your fastest way to catch up with everything we're talking about.
And they have an episode.
Sorry to Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, like they have the episode with the like you have to take care of the egg thing, like all that stuff. Like it's all there.
But I don't know if we can talk about animated high school series without talking about Daria.
Oh yeah, I mean I have not watched as much Daria.
Yeah, and I mean, part of this definitely skews more towards like our age.
Yeah,
obviously we missed the moment of Daria.
Mm-hmm. But Daria is also an MTV animated series.
Yeah, it was an MTV animated series.
MTV being in general a big adolescent target thing.
No, but I think because I think in a lot of ways Daria is the anti-Clueless.
Yes.
Not in just that it's animated and Clueless is real, but in that, Clueless, we have the world from the perspective of Cher. That's her name? Cher?
Yeah.
Okay. In Clueless, we have the world from the perspective of Cher, who is like the attractive, popular girl.
And unbelievably privileged, and her dad's a $500 an hour billing lawyer.
Yeah. She has some crazy computer that
helps her pick out her clothes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's a touch screen.
But Daria is interesting in that the main character, Daria, has a sister who is very much Cher.
Oh yeah.
And her parents are two high power, high profile, wealthy professionals. But the main tension comes from the fact that like they are very almost like American Psycho level, like driven kinds of people, with their cell phones and sweater vests and the kinds of things that were hallmarks of early 90s success.
Yeah.
Whereas Daria is more interested in like the liberal arts and going to college to do liberal arts things than she is to like but the interesting thing is just like how much her parents undervalue that.
Yeah. No, and I think that it hits on even maybe the outside of high school aspect of like adolescence is that feeling of like you don't fit in, and that in certain cases that's true even within your own family, like that there's this identity that's expected of you, maybe even more so than among your peers, that like your parents have an idea of who you're going to be, and that age is when you start to either line up with that or deviate from that because you get to start having a little bit more independence and making your own choices.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe a component that was actually missing from a lot of the media we've talked about so far in terms of like the element of parental expectation.
But yeah, no, I like the inclusion of Daria. Does anybody have anything else we need to?
I'm good. We were much more vocal about high school than I thought we'd be. We have some unresolved stuff.
One, only because it's sitting on a nightstand behind me. I feel like it's worth mentioning, especially on the level of parental expectation, is the graphic novel that came out about 10 years ago now, I think. American Born Chinese, which is a look at a boy who is the son of first generation immigrants from China, assimilating into an American elementary school. And it follows him from elementary school to middle school to high school, through this like crazy transformation, in terms of like the culture he is surrounded by, the culture he's expected to assimilate to, the culture he's expected to be a part of at home. And there's like one moment that sticks out in my mind, in that like it's when he's a little boy, his grandmother asks him what he wants to be when he grows up, and he says a transformer, because his favorite toy is like his transformer. And his parents are like, no, but his grandmother looks at him and says, and he's like 5 in this scene, that you can be anything you want as long as you're willing to forfeit your soul. Which is like so profoundly dark to say to a child, but it is kind of like at least like indicative of the gravity of like all of these things that you're expected to be as you grow up.
Oh yeah. And then I think that because of that, like what we talked about, the narrative of high school in real life, like not in the fiction or even the nonfiction we're talking about, like that, like there are these thoughts that like, yeah, prom is this big building point, but even beyond that we, as an elementary and middle schooler, and even before that, like it's all been about like you go to school until this point, and then you get to start being whatever it is you want to be. If you want to go to college, or if you want to go to the military, or start a job, whatever, that you're supposed to, on some level, we're all taught that we have to have made a decision about who we are by the time we finish high school, which is crazy because we don't necessarily help people super well in doing that, because we're making everybody take the same classes and do the same things until that point. But no, I think it's good to include something that talks about just the, like, how early that starts, that you start really putting into everybody, into the ear of 5-year-olds, the idea that of soul forfeiture, that like is leading towards that narrative of the day you graduate, you're supposed to say like, okay, this is what I'm doing now, and it's my call.
Yeah.
And that growing up has so much angst around it, because those last couple of years of being a kid into an adult, you are expected to go from not really having agency to being fully independent and thought out individual, while also in that time having to scrape together an identity by like what clique and all the shenanigans you get put in. And what, say the name of it again?
American Born Chinese.
American Born Chinese. I have not seen this. I need to check that out.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Well, you guys let's review. We've got Mean Girls, Freaks and Geeks, Clueless, American Born Chinese, To Kill a Mockingbird, Clone High,
High School Musical.
High School Musical. That's right,
Daria.
and Daria. I think that's a good general studies
Yeah.
assignment for anyone trying to understand, anyone sitting in a bunker trying to invent the idea of cliques with their rock friends, and not to be confused with like people who are into rock and roll. These are just stones, not to be confused with stoners. I'm sorry. All right, we good to seal up the time capsule?
Let's
Yeah.
do it.
All right, let's seal it up.
She doesn't even go here.